Champion Judd Trump.
Judd, let's take you right back to the beginning and the Crucible debut in '07 against Shaun Murphy. How much can you remember about the match, and how much can you remember about how you were feeling in the last couple of minutes before walking down those famous stairs for the first time?
I can't remember much from the day. I can remember sort of the mid-session interval and stuff like that. I can't remember walking out or anything like that. It's one of the games though that I remember where that was probably the game where I knew my eyesight was terrible. I figured it out in that game. So up until that point, I wasn't wearing contact lenses or anything like that, and I can remember playing him and realising how bad my eyesight was. So that one for the wrong reasons. But there was little things in that I learned from just how to control yourself at the interval and stuff. I think I went out for food and stuff, which I just would never do now. Took too much energy out myself, and Shaun come through and used his experience in the second half of the game.
Can you remember feeling any kind of excitement or butterflies before you walked out or not?
No, I can't remember the start of the game. So I know from memory, in up until maybe sort of 23, 24, there wasn't many nerves there at all. So I think I've probably been more nervous then than after I won my first title when I went back there the next time. But just a lot of inexperience on that first time. It would obviously been a dream come true to get there at that stage of my career, so early on to get there. But yeah, I mean, it was a tough game as well. I think Shaun might even been the defending champion that year, and yeah, it didn't get much tougher.
Then you came up one shy in 2008, 9 and 10, Joe Swale, Stephen Lee and Tom Ford. But what a different scenario unfolded in 2011 when you went back, because people outside snooker thought you'd appeared from nowhere, but of course you arrived fresh off the back of winning in China, but a very different context in which to take part in your second Crucible from your first.
Yeah, it'd been a tough few years not getting through, losing at the final hurdle. I think there was one or two tough close losses, and obviously devastating not to get back there. After you experience it for the first time, you want to get back as quick as possible. So yeah, there was a tough little period throughout there. I wasn't sort of, there was the odd good performance here and there. I think I reached one semi-final, but it wasn't until I won that ranking event in China that I really believed in myself. And off the back of that, yeah, I went into that tournament full of confidence. Again, another one of the toughest draws you could possibly get, but this time I really fancied my chances.
And how early on did you get the feeling that it could turn out to be a special run?
I think very early. I think just turning up, I knew I hadn't had the belief in myself, maybe as a kid, as a junior, when I kind of knew I was going to win events, but I'd never experienced that as a professional. So to go in against Neil, one of the best players in the world at that time, I was still lower down the rankings, still very young. I kind of I believed in myself so much that I kind of didn't think anything could go wrong. I don't think I've really felt like that since. There's been a couple of games. But yeah, it was an amazing feeling to have in that tournament. And yeah, I'm not sure how many people have experienced that kind of year. I think Shaun probably did when he won it for the first time. There's been a couple of times when the top players have played extraordinarily good throughout the tournament, but it was just become so easy in that event. I was playing so well, everything was going in, and yeah, it was just enjoying every step of it.
And after you beat Neil, which I think was 10-8, you literally started potting balls off the lampshades. I looked it up. 9 half centuries and a century against Martin in the last 16, 9 half centuries and a century against Graham Dott. People really fell in love with your game over that fortnight. And also, Twitter wasn't that big then. And here was this young hotshot who just won in China, and I remember the excitement and the surprise people felt that you were tweeting in mid-session intervals. It was, you captured the public's imagination.
Yeah, I mean, they were good days when you wouldn't get abused, so you could be you could get involved a lot more then. But yeah, I think just at that age, when I watch snooker now, the manner that I played in the enjoyment, you don't see that often. So I think it really resonated with everyone, and I didn't have a care in the world after I won that tournament. Love to be able to play like that every single game, but it's not that easy. But just how happy I was to be there, how I think everyone could see that, and how much I was enjoying myself. So it's very difficult to kind of get the right balance. You can't do it all the time, but it's something that I tried to put back into my game, especially last year as well. I felt a lot like the 2011 run last year. Hopefully I can, in the majors, I'm starting to be a lot more consistent, so you can just enjoy it just that little bit more.
Before we touch on the atmosphere towards the end of the final against John, I wonder how much you can remember about the semi against Ding, because that was utterly extraordinary. 10 half centuries, 4 centuries, 7-4 up, 10-7 down. That was an absolutely brilliant single table setup match. Can you remember any of it?
I can remember bits. I can remember how good it was. I've kind of forgot. I've not really watched the game since, but I knew while I was in the game there wasn't a lot missed at all, and I knew at that time the game was unbelievable standard. I can remember just potting so many ridiculous balls, and the tables back then seemed to be so much more reactive, and I could play shots that maybe I can't do now on the heavier tables. And they were all going in, the screw shots, the balls down the row, everything was flying in. So I was just creating chances off nothing every time, and it's something that maybe only Mark Williams really does. He comes to the table, there's nothing on, all of a sudden he's cleared up. So yeah, it was a great feeling, an amazing game to be involved with, and I think whoever lost that game really took a lot out of us. I think Ding got to a final since then, but I truly believe that was probably, if he beat me, it would have been his best chance to win it.
And having said that you can't remember much just before you walked out for your debut, can you recall how you might have been feeling, presumably full of confidence, before walking out for your maiden Crucible final, especially having played so well against Ding in the semis?
Yeah, I can't remember before the game either in that one, but I just know at that point that I would have, in my head, I couldn't lose. I didn't feel like I was just invincible at that time. And even at the start of the game, I can remember playing John, and a couple of shots were going in, and he was just sort of shaking his head a little bit in disbelief that someone would even take some of the balls on. And yeah, I felt very, very good. Zero nerves at all, just purely out there enjoying it. And yeah, it wasn't up until sort of the middle of the game. There was the odd shot here and there that really changed the game, but yeah, it was a superb experience.
And one thing I'm very much hoping you can remember, because it was utterly extraordinary, was the atmosphere that greeted both of you when you came down on the Monday night for the final session. John had obviously been there and won it multiple times. The look of disbelief on his face was incredible. I think that standing ovation lasted more than 2 minutes. Have you experienced an atmosphere close to that since?
I think that's probably one of the only walk-ons I can remember. I don't think I'll ever forget that one. For me, there's been a lot of good experiences, a good atmosphere since. Does anything top that? I don't personally think it has. There's been sort of games at the Masters that have been special just because of the amount of people in other places, but in terms of just sheer excitement, and everyone was just so excited for what was going to happen, and I don't think that's been matched from what I've seen. That there's been a few games that have been close, but for me, I think that's probably the best atmosphere I've ever experienced and ever seen.
And bearing in mind how well you did play throughout that championship and in the final, and how young you were, I guess if we'd asked you after that match, how long will it take you to get back in another World Championship final, you'd have probably said, oh, next year or 2 years. You know, you had to wait a long time to get back in the final again for a second time, didn't you?
Yeah, I think at that point, even when I was maybe being interviewed after, and there wasn't a care in the world. It wasn't, oh, it might take eight years to get back in the final. If I knew that at the time, then I think it'd have been a whole different story. But yeah, just very naive maybe at that point, and I knew how hard it was to get to that point. There'd been obviously 3 years before that I hadn't qualified in tough games, but I kind of didn't expect that it would take so long. And yeah, there was a few tough losses in between then, and a few tough games that maybe that I needed to really harden myself to be the player I am now today.
Made the semis in 13, coming back from 7-2 down against Sean before losing to Ronnie in the semis. I wonder what your recollections are now that we're, 8 years on from the semi-final against Stuart Bingham, because many people would have been expecting your semi-final opponent to be Ronnie. So did that affect your mindset going into that match? Because all of a sudden, no disrespect to Stuart, having had a wonderful win over Ronnie, but a lot of people were thinking, right, he's had his one flash of brilliance here at the Crucible. Trump's going to be the favourite and he's going to get in the final again.
Yeah, I think, I can't remember it clearly, but obviously you'd rather play Stuart than Ronnie. But I think that was probably the biggest mistake I could make. I can remember being 1-0 up, or the table was very, very active. I can remember that. I should have gone 2-0 up and missed something. And I knew that early on. I thought that could be a big mistake here, not going 2-0 straight away. And then I was kind of chasing after that. I was never in control. Stuart was playing brilliantly well. And probably, yeah, the best he's ever played, I think, during that tournament. So just tough to cling on for the whole game. And I always felt, though, that I'd have it just enough in me to get back at the right time, which managed to draw level at 16-all. But then he played a brilliant frame in the last. 2017
is interesting. I'm really curious to know how much of a pivotal moment it was for you when you went out to Rory McLeod, and understandably, you know, your emotions must have been all over the place. I know we didn't get to speak to you afterwards, and you were gone. Bearing in mind how much success followed relatively quickly after that, was that defeat to Rory quite a sting and quite a motivation for the blast of titles you went on to win in the subsequent 4 or 5 years?
No, I said it before, and I don't know if anyone believes, but I was injured during that game, and that was just the reason I lost. It was as simple as that. So it wasn't a game that hurt. I was disappointed in the interval, and there was people with me. I can remember Ollie Lyons being there and just speaking to him and saying, I can't possibly win this, and things like that. So it was a tough game mentally, going in, because I felt like I was in form before that game, and I felt like, with the draw, no disrespect, that it was a good chance for me to have a deep run. But there's been, my record, I feel like, at the Crucible has been as good as anyone over the past 10 years. There's been a lot of semi-finals, finals, and I think it's only maybe Mark Selby that has had a better run in that time. But every time I go there, I feel like the long distance game does suit me, and I feel like I am a little bit of a slow start in that first round, but the best of 19 gives me the chance to get through 10-9, which I have done a couple of times, and then really be able to kick on.
Well, speaking about coming through the 10-9, what a way to start 2019, the year that you got your hands on the title. You know, it was a brilliant match against Tepchai, and that cross double was a moment of genius.
Yeah, I mean, it was another tough draw. A lot of the games have been very tough. I think everyone that year, I think, either wanted Tepchai to play me or Ronnie. And I know he's had a couple of tough draws every time he's qualified there. But yeah, another tough game. I thought it would go close, a little bit too close for my liking. He was in the last frame, and yeah, at that point I'm thinking I'm out again, first round. So horrible feeling, and all of a sudden I've got in, took the balls really well, and then that was it really. I think in the next game I struggled, but after that I played really well.
Do you think moments like that are what separate great players from champions? Because you were nerveless when you went for that shot, and a lot of other players wouldn't have taken that on. Is that what separates the people who've won that title from those who've come close but not got over the line?
I think at that point, I mean, there's times in your career where it goes with you, it goes against you. So I just felt like at that time it was the right shot. You've got to stay positive, and I felt that the positives sort of outweighed the negatives at that point, and I felt good enough taking the balls in the decider. But still, I mean, it wasn't easy. It was obviously tough for Tepchire, but is those clearances that are important to help you win titles.
And then you come through the match having led against Ding and been pegged back to 9-all, finished that one off well. Good win against Stephen Maguire in the quarter. So I guess facing Gary in the semis, it had been, you know, so long since you'd been in the final, you know, back in 11. You must have been absolutely desperate for that win. And you must have seen playing Gary, no disrespect, that was a great opportunity to get back in our sport's showpiece showdown.
Yeah, I think it was the last 4 frames against Ding. I think that was the turning point in the tournament. I think up until then, played absolutely awful. I can remember just thinking that I'm going to be going out. Then all of a sudden there was, I think there might have been an interval or something, and played absolutely unbelievable for the last 4 frames. So against Stephen Maguire, got off to an amazing start. Semi-final, obviously, Gary's not a bigger name as some of the other top players, so I felt like it was a really good chance. And I felt like if I played to a good level the whole final, that I'd be able to get through to the final. And I started off reasonably well. I was just sort of nicking them 5-3 and just building up the lead like that, and all of a sudden you're kind of in big control and looking for the final.
How much of a difference do you think it made in 19 that you had the experience of contesting a final already under your belt, albeit that you came up on the wrong side against John on that occasion?
It was a massive help, and also a massive help that it was against John. I think just having that loss against him and being so long since I've been in the final, I definitely had a different kind of fire in my stomach than maybe some of the other games. I really had something to get up for. So it was an absolute blessing in disguise that John got through that, I think, for me. Got through that semi-final against David Gilbert, I think it was now, and I think that was probably the best thing that could have happened. I knew I was going to have to play amazing from the start, and it made my job just that little bit easier.
I remember speaking to Phil Yates ahead of the match, and we were just doing a normal preview by the table, talking about what the final was going to be like, and I said to him, do you think Judd would feel like he's got a little bit of a monkey off his back if he wins this final and becomes a world champion at last? And he came out with a classic Yates comment. He said, "It's not just a monkey, it's a silverback gorilla." And then he sort of burst out into laughter. Were you conscious of the fact that, bearing in mind how much you'd won at that stage, you hadn't got over the line in the biggest one of all? Was that in your thoughts at all, or were you just fully focused on the match itself?
No, I was just fully focused. I think now, when I look back, it was a massive thing to win that title. I think it didn't really sink in, but I mean, you're always going to get the questions: is he ever going to win it? It's been however long since he's been in the final, and that kind of thing. So it was obviously nice to be back in the final, but I think maybe just the determination in that game. I just was not going to lose, and it was kind of just ingrained from the very start of the game that I would do anything that I had to do to win. And luckily for me, I bought my best game from the very start, from the get-go.
It was superb, and from 5-all to then blast to 12-5 up, you did the damage in the middle part of the match. I remember saying to someone afterwards, it felt like, in the context of an Olympic Games with athletics, you can never ask more of any athlete than a personal best in an Olympic final to go alongside their gold medal. And from an outsider's point of view, that's what it felt like you produced under the greatest pressure against one of the toughest opponents mentally ever to pick up a cue. it felt like when those questions were asked, you had the answers and in magnificent style. That's got to be something that gives you incredible pride.
Yeah, I don't think that. Certainly, there is. I mean, there's definitely top 2 or 3 performances I've ever done. May even be the best performance, and I don't feel like many people can say they've played the best they've ever played in their whole professional career on the biggest stage in the biggest final. So, yeah, I feel like that's an achievement in itself, and I just knew at that point. There was a shot at 5-all that I pulled off, a screw shot. After that, I was just on top of the world. I knew I wasn't going to miss, and without trying to sound cocky or arrogant, there was something in me in that game. I knew I wasn't going to miss. I knew every time I got to the table I was going to pop one and clear up, every single time. It didn't matter how long the game would have gone on for. If it had gone for 10 days, it would have been the same outcome. There was just something inside me that I wasn't willing to give that one away. And yeah, it was an incredible feeling, a feeling that I'll never forget. And in the end, I can remember being, I think it was 16-9 up, or 16-8 up, and coming back for the last 2 frames, and I knew I was going to play well again. It was such an incredible feeling that I was able just to take everything in as well. So in games or big tournaments since, it's just not very often you can do that, and I think any top player can vouch for that. It's not often you can just go out there and enjoy it, but strange feeling. I knew how well I was playing, and I could really look around and take everything in at the same time.
So what was it like when the match was, unequivocally over? Was it elation, or was it relief, or was it just a whole mix of feelings all rolled into one?
Yeah, when I was potting the winning balls, I think it was relief, and strange feeling, because obviously the match from an outsider's, it always looked like it was going to be me for the last maybe 2 sessions. It was mine to lose. So even though it was still a huge lead, I knew against Johnny to come back against me quite a few times, and I could not do anything wrong, and he could reel off 5 frames. So when you actually pot the winning ball, is a different feeling. And yeah, just pure relief really, and something that maybe I hadn't imagined that I needed to get off my back, but after winning it, it was yeah, a whole different feeling, and it brought a whole different confidence about my game. And I didn't want to be one of the world champions that had a bad season after. It happened quite often, where someone would win the world championship and kind of fade away, and that was my goal, to not let that happen after. As soon as I won it, I was sort of within a week or 2 just looking forward to the next season.
And all credit to you, because it came in the middle of an extraordinary run of tournaments and glory. And it was great to see you sharing that with your family. You said something really nice about your dad. Do you think that all that success would have still come without your brother?
It's hard to pinpoint on any one person. But I mean, my brother would definitely. I couldn't practice how I have been able to practice the last 3, 4, 5 years without him there. So he's definitely helped my game, having him at tournaments, not being alone, not walking around, going food, drinks on your own. It definitely played a humongous part. Obviously, I still have to put the work in, but I think everyone around me, the whole family, brother, anyone that's helped me has played a part and a big role in getting me where I am today. And hopefully, it's not been as easy over the past season or 2, but hopefully there's still a lot of good times left in snooker.
Yeah, because it's interesting, isn't it? Because you haven't been afraid of being a spokesman for the sport at times, which is great. But as characters, away from the table and being asked questions about a sport that you've helped bring on in leaps and bounds, you're quite a modest, quiet, shy family, aren't you?
Yeah, well, I definitely get it from my mum and dad. They're very quiet, and definitely sort of paid off on me and my brother. Very, I don't know, just appreciative of everything, and never had sort of anything as a kid. My mum and dad had to work super hard to be able to pay for everything. So I think there's always times when you kind of forget that, but I think whenever I have my mum or dad around at the big tournaments, you go back into that mode, especially for me, just appreciating every minute. And I think I've been able to do it now and again. The World Championship last year come up just short. But that was one of the only times recently that I've been just back to myself, just back enjoying it, just appreciating every single second of it. And I think for me, as every year passes, you get a year older, and it's probably one less time to really enjoy it there at the Crucible. So yeah, I don't want to go back there not appreciating every single moment. And it's something that maybe over the last 5 years I've really grown as a person to try and take and cherish every moment at maybe the Masters, the World Championship, the two big ones. Just appreciate every single second, especially after missing the Masters in COVID. That was one of the toughest moments I've ever had, I think, playing as well as I did to then miss the tournament. So every time I get to play at the Masters or now in the world it's just a different experience, a different joy.
Now, bearing in mind what you said about winning the title and wanting to have a subsequent good season, you really did. And before COVID struck, people were already looking ahead and thinking, wow, maybe Judd could break this curse of no first-time champion ever successfully defending the title, Ken getting close in '98, losing to John in the final. Do you think that COVID delay cost you a big chance? Because your momentum, had the Worlds in 20 been when it should have been, in April and May, your momentum was irresistible, and yet you had to find it again in August, and you weren't quite the same player you had been a few months previously.
Yeah, I mean, we're never going to know, but it definitely didn't help. It didn't do me any favours. Just think being out of sort of match tournament practice kind of just levelled it up for everyone, I feel like. And yeah, it didn't help me. I mean, it's an easy excuse to have, but I definitely feel like I'd have been more of a favourite, more confident going into it if the tournament was when it was supposed to be. So yeah, you never know. It happened. It was tough for everyone, but I definitely feel like off the back, maybe my season was too good as well. I don't know. Maybe it was too good. Maybe you can sometimes get overconfident. But I feel just everyone, it was a tough period for everyone. But yeah, if I definitely would have had more chance if it was in his original position.
What about last year then? I mean, the match that sticks in the mind ahead of the final was that fantastic semi-final showdown against Mark Williams, and to come through a decider against him, and he was playing some unbelievable snooker. That was another all-time great semi-final occasion at the Crucible, wasn't it? Yeah,
and I think what won me that was just that first session. I knew, and just in my experience, I knew how important, because he was struggling, I knew how important those frames might be come the end of the tournament. And I knew every game before that he'd played unbelievable, some of the best snooker I've seen anyone play. His break building was absolutely ridiculous, the amount of centuries he was knocking in. But I just knew, with the experience I've had over the past sort of 15 years being professional, that first session was so important. Every single frame that I could get more in front of him could be crucial at the end. So in the end, it turned out that way.
So what are your memories of your third final then, from last spring overall? Did it, as the match ended, did you feel like you were part of something momentous from a snooker history point of view? Were you able to kind of recognise that, Ronnie tying Hendry, or were you just immersed in your own disappointment at coming so close to a second, but not quite?
Yeah, I think for a lot of that game it was just a bit numb, really. I think the game with Mark took so much out of me, and there hasn't been many times where I felt a relief like that to get over the line and still have another game to play after that. So normally you only feel like that if you come through maybe a close final, but yeah, the way Mark played in kind of the ups and downs, looking like I was going to win comfortably after the first session, looking like I'm going out 16-15 down, turning it around. I can remember after that game just being interviewed and just being not even happy, just absolutely spent. I had no energy left. So the first session of the Ronnie game was just numb. I had nothing there. So I would try my best, but just wasn't with it for the first day, and that really just kind of threw the game away in that first day. I tried my best on the second day, but it was just too much. So, I mean, at the end of the game, I knew it was going to be tough to get back into it, and you already prepare yourself that he's gonna win. But obviously, it's a different feeling for Ronnie. I could see it in his eyes throughout the whole final, how much he wanted to and how determined he was to get over the line in that final. And yeah, I've got the utmost respect for anyone that can win the World Championship, but to win it 7 times, the longevity, everything like that is extremely special.
You touched there on the mental fatigue. The number of times in 17 days somebody in the press room, either spoken or written, refers to it as a marathon. From the player's perspective and from the unusual perspective of somebody who has been in it on day 1 and day 17, how draining is it to have to concentrate? Okay, you're not playing every single day, but from your point of view, it's tiring. From our perspective, it's longer than the Olympic Games and it happens every year. But just how mentally draining is it to be in the tournament from start to finish?
I think the first week is okay. It's not until you get that second round and maybe you play again quick in the quarterfinals, then it gets tough. You're playing 2 sessions a day every single day, or pretty much every day for the next 9 or 10 days. That's when it really starts to get to you, and that's why it's so important to win your games easy, I think, at the Crucible, because you can't really manage more than one close game, just the amount of energy it takes out of you. So I think obviously the time I got to the final, the first time, my run was quite easy up until maybe the semi-final, then a tough game. Same with the final I won. It was only really the first game that was close. So you're kind of breezing through the tournament, but this time for me it was a bit different, having a really close game in the semi-final. It's extremely hard, and I think you've seen it a couple of times recently over the past 4 or 5 years, when someone has come through an extremely close semi-final, have nothing left in the final. So it's just so important to get through that semi-final as easy as possible, because if you don't, you're up against it to get back in the right headspace for the final.
Judd, it's an absolute pleasure to take that trip down memory lane, and what an epic title it was in 19. Thanks for talking to us, and the very best of luck in this forthcoming Crucible Cauldron.
Cheers, thank you.